Hey guys, this is AwesomeJohn22 coming today with another review, and today we are going to take a look at, in honor of Avengers 2 and the Marvel Cinematic Universe still doing so well, we're going to take a look at a toy line that I have talked about a lot, praised a lot in other reviews, especially my two overviews of the Iron Man 3 toy line, and that is the Iron Man 2 toy line. And, well, we're going to do this in overview style, so I'm not going to be taking a look at any one particular figure or like each individual figure that I have from the toy line. We're going to be instead taking a look at these in kind of a one at a time example type thing. I'm going to use a few examples to show you what it is that I feel is so great about this toy line and try to explain it. And we're going to start out with this guy, the what was this, the Mark 6 armor, I believe, the main armor from Iron Man 2, which was a movie that had its issues. I still really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed this version of the armor. It was a nice blend between the comic book aesthetic, well, some versions of the comic book aesthetic, with the triangular arc reactor and the movie aesthetic that we had already seen in the first movie, and I really enjoyed it. And here, let me pull back for a second. This was the first figure I picked up. Originally, I was just going to get Iron Man and War Machine in their regular configuration and ignore the rest, because I didn't really care that much about them. I knew Tony had his Hall of Armors. I really had no desire to shell out the money to build my own Hall of Armors. And looking back at this guy, taking a closer look at him, he's not quite what I remember him to be. He's not quite as good as I remember, but he's still a very good figure, and we're going to talk about him here. First of all, let's zoom in, take a look at some details on him. Still got a little bit of dust on him. I thought I got him pretty dusted. You can see, geez, there's lots of dust on him. Getting the camera up close. Maybe I should actually dust these things in front of the camera from now on before I do the reviews. Anyway, we have him with this red plastic, which you can see here, the red plastic on his shoulder is a different color than the red plastic on his chest. One or the other is painted. I believe it's on his chest is painted, but it's odd because you can see several different shades of red plastic throughout this guy. But you can see here, really nicely painted eyes. The arc reactor is very nicely painted. We got some silver through there, which it doesn't quite line up with the little ports there. Nice silver stripes there that also don't quite line up. Silver on his arms, gold on his arms. And the main issue people had with this, silver and gold on his legs as well. The main issue people had with this toy line, and I completely agree, is the paint applications. Everything else was great. The sculpts were great. The designs were great. They still are. They still hold up really well. It's the paint applications. Like this guy, the color on him is just all over the place. I can't quite tell if they tried to paint to create a contrast and shading and whatnot and just went overboard, or if these plastic pieces legit weren't the color they wanted them, so they painted them and they ended up not color matching very well. But he's just got a lot of different reds on him, and it still looks good. Especially from a distance, you can't really tell. You have to really look at him, but it's just not great. And I remember standing in the toy aisle after I decided to collect this toy line more rigorously, going through multiple versions of each figure in package, trying to find the one with the best paint applications. And it got better as the toy line progressed, but these early ones, they were a nightmare. And this guy, I remember I had to look at 5 or 6 of them just to find one that had decent paint applications. But once I got him out of the package, I was just blown away, because these things, they have so much articulation. Everywhere that you would expect there to be articulation, it's there. I mean, the head is really tight, but it does move in pretty much every direction. you would want it to. They have these great ab crunches, which can rotate all the way around, which give them a good amount of range of motion downward and upward. The hips are on these weird joints where you have to kind of rotate them in their sockets to get them to where you want to go, but once you do, I'm not showing it off very well, but you can see in there the joint. There we go. Must have just been stuck. Great range of motion. A little tricky to pull off and figure out. The joints on this guy don't quite work like a lot of figures, but that's because figures at this scale didn't really have this kind of articulation at the time. I mean, the Iron Man 1 toy line, rather, was in 6-inch scale rather than 3 3/4-inch scale like these guys, and it had inferior articulation to these figures. And can I get even frame a little bit better? Just looking at this, guy with that great articulation and the really great sculpt that is very screen accurate, I would still really highly recommend this toy and this toy line if it just continued to only do this. But this toy line didn't just limit itself to armors that we saw in the movie as figures. It didn't just limit itself to repainting these figures. It created new armors. For example, here's my favorite armor from the entire toy line. I'm not going to show the articulation on this guy, because unless I state otherwise, their articulation is always the same. But this is the HyperSpeed Armor, I believe it was called. And it's great. I mean, I'm going to zoom in here. You can see repulsor light on his hand. Really cool blocky face sculpt. Already we can see much better paint applications all throughout this guy. I love the color on this, the kind of muted red with this like almost light goldish silver. And I don't know, there's just something about this guy that I really like. He has this thing on his arm, which was his accessory. I believe the Mark 6 armor came with a blast of some kind, but this guy gets this thing, which had a missile. Of course, I've lost the missile, but even on the packaging, if I'm remembering correctly, they list this thing as a shield. So I just have him carry it as like this big tower shield on his arm, and I kind of like it. And supposedly this thing can move super fast, and I always thought that was a really cool power. And this guy just ended up really being my favorite from the set, from the series. And what was great about this, and a lot of the other figures, the majority of the figures in the line, is that they were these alternate armors, the same kinds of armors that you might expect Tony to come up with in the comics, but they were in the movie style, because this is very clearly the movie aesthetic. And it was great, because it meant you were expanding your movie Hall of Armors based on these designs that may never show up in the movie. And you kind of got that satisfaction of collecting without having to rely on just the designs that the movies supplied. And it was really great. And yet the toy line still managed to get even better. So we're going to take this guy off to the side. Does not want to stand on this table. I do not know why. Like, seriously, just... There we go, finally. Let's see if he'll stay. Yep, okay. Because what this toy line also did was it gave us really great new versions of armors that we would see in the comics. Like here we have a comic book series armor. It's one of the few that I own because it's actually fairly close to the movie aesthetic, so I used it as the movie version of this armor rather than the comic book version, which kind of goes against what I'm saying. But if you don't believe me, look up comic series Iron Man 2 figures, Google it, you'll find you had like the classic comic book Iron Man. You had like, well, there was a lot of them. There was even a Hulkbuster that was actually quite good. Just Google them. I promise you will get lots and lots of images and you'll be thoroughly impressed. But here we have the oh, what's it called? It's the one. It's the armor that does ice blasts and stuff, like cryo armor or something. And bringing it in, you can see much more cartoony head sculpt. Much more like something you would see from a comic book or an animated series. Not quite as sharp. A little less realistic. He's got these little dome things on his hips like he does in the comics. But you can see here, the paint applications on this one are actually great. I really love this. And I did not, if I recall correctly, I did not have to look hard to find one with this paint. It looks really good. And once again, now we have movie-style auxiliary armors that we are probably never going to see in the movies that allow us to expand our collection without relying on the movie designs. And we have a great avenue for collecting. Jeez, the lights are really shining bright on this guy. We have a way of collecting comic book armors that are never going to make it into something like, say, the Marvel Universe Toyline. As an avenue for collectors, that blew me away. That the Toyline was able to devote resources to what was essentially 2 Toylines. And still, it had more to offer. So let's take this guy off to the side, and let's take a look at my example figure. The standard design for War Machine in the movie. This was the second figure that I ever picked up, and I really like it. It's actually, next to the HyperSpeed Armor, it's probably my favorite from the entire line. So much bulkier, it's got so many more things on it. It's got this giant missile launcher that I should probably take off now that I've lost the missile, but I just like it too much. Yeah, it still had the same articulation as the Mark VI armor. And then there's this, which is not nearly as good a figure, just in terms of general engineering, but I've got this guy here to make an example. When referring to this guy, you can see here, they're both clearly War Machine. Let's go ahead and just kind of pluck this off the top here. You can see, I mean, clearly this one's a little simplified. You don't have the big pauldrons. The guns on the arms aren't quite as big. He's not quite as tall. He clearly isn't quite the same color. He definitely doesn't have the same articulation. There's limits to it, but he looks pretty good. I mean, they look fairly similar. And this was from the slightly large... He's really dusty, jeez. This was from the slightly larger packaging Toyline, branch of the Toyline, rather, that had like bigger accessories and more simplified figures. And even in that situation, even when the figure is simplified and doesn't have quite the articulation, doesn't have quite the look, it still looks good. The molding on this guy still looks really good. The color still looks really good. He still has really nicely painted eyes. His arc reactor is really nicely painted. You can see his repulsor blast is painted great silver all the way through. His gunmetal gray could be darker. That's the only real complaint I have with it, aside from, you know, limited articulation. But it still works. It works really nicely. And then he has the big weapons package that we already saw. It just slides over the top, and even it has some customization options. You can see here there's 2 different mounting points, so you can actually slide them back if you want. You have these weapons up top, which can actually... remove this again, and I'll show you. They can actually attach. You can see there's attachment slots there. They can actually attach to the base War Machine, or you can give him this big long-range cannon look thing, and it works out really well. It's really nice. And altogether, let's bring them all in now and kind of look at them together. All in all, this Toyline is actually the reason why I primarily collect action figures in the 3 3/4 inch scale. I love this Toyline so much, I made it the basis for my entire Marvel movie toy collection across all movie platforms. It's why I haven't collected any Guardians of the Galaxy or Age of Ultron toys yet, because they don't have 3 3/4 inch toy lines. And it drives me nuts, because why not? You had this. And yes, there were some downgrades going from this to the Avengers movie to the Captain America toy line wasn't quite as good as this. The Thor toy line was, well, it was laughably bad in a lot of ways. But they still had the same aesthetic, the same size. And even with the Iron Man 3 toys with the assemblers that started out kind of shaky, they still got so much better as it went on. This was like the main size scale for the Marvel Cinematic Universe toy lines, and they just abandoned it, and I don't understand. And it just bugs the crap out of me. And now there are some, like, there's a, like, 5-inch Groot with an action feature that would be about in scale with a 3 3/4 inch figure because he's bigger. But there aren't any 3 3/4 inch Guardians of the Galaxy characters to go with him. There are only these little, like, 2-inch guys, you know? They're just... It just really bums me out because I feel like they missed a really great opportunity to release some really great toys alongside these toys. And I'm never going to get over it, guys. I just am not. Just like when I look at the assemblers, even the better ones, I can't get over the fact that, well, they were such a step down from these guys. They really are. I mean, even the worst figures in the toy line, which were usually the really early ones, they were still better than the worst or the best of the assemblers in many different ways. Not in all ways. The assemblers still have really great paint apps, even better than some of the best figures from this toy line. Looking at the best of the assemblers, it's still better than some of the best from this toy line. But still, these guys were wonderful. And now that's just gone. And I don't have all the figures from this series yet. I'm still trying to collect some of them. There was an Earth Iron Man that was like a big brownish golden guy with like giant saws or something that I would really like to get my hands on, and a couple others that were repaints because they did eventually do the repaint thing, but they did a really good job of distinguishing them from the base mold enough that you could buy that it was just really similar looking armor. So I thought it worked out. And there were other things about this toy line I didn't even talk about, like the stands. I mostly don't use the stands anymore because they're kind of bulky and they take up room on the shelf. And these guys stand okay on their own. They had these little stands that came with these little slots. They were like rectangle with like a little slot here. And you could put these collector cards that came with the figures. And I still have the collector cards somewhere. I tried to find them from this review, but I can't find them. I have them like in a little like trading card tin somewhere. And they were literally like yay big, and they were like these translucent cards, and you could layer them, and they had armor pieces on each layer, so you could use them, rearrange them, and you could kind of see what it would look like if the armors could swap pieces. Because that was always a thing with Iron Man in the comics. He had the modular armor, the Type 13 modular armor, and it would swap out parts as needed, and that's kind of what the assemblers did. But I mean, you understand the point. It was such a fun little toy line, and I really lament that it's pretty much gone now, that it's pretty much done. Every once in a while you'll see like a Toys R Us exclusive that still reuses one of these molds with, you know, the expected amount of mold degradation, but for the most part this toy line is dead. And yeah, it makes me sad. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for this video, this overview video. I hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly enjoyed making it. I was really fast and loose with this one. I didn't intend to be. I had like a whole script worked out in my head. But I ended up just kind of gushing about these toys, which, I mean, quite frankly, did you expect anything else from me, honestly? Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly enjoyed making it. Please help me out, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you feel so inclined. In the description down below, you'll find links to all the other things I'm working on. Check those out. Either way, this has been Awesome John 22, and I will talk to you guys later.